So welcome to the Results Rules OK podcast. My name's Dave Holland. And for those that have been on watching my podcast before, you'll notice the background is slightly different now because we've moved into the renovation cottage. This is actually the back end of the wardrobe. I wouldn't say that to people I didn't know. There's racks of clothes down there, so it's temporary, but so far it's working. So thank you for listening in and tuning in. My guest today, Mr. George Blakeway, who is the Managing Director of the Fruitful Group, which we'll explain later on, but also has perhaps an even more exciting, more interesting story to tell us, but I'll let him do that. So George, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, David, and yeah, thanks for having me.
And where are you based? I mean, people know I'm based in sort of middle of France, middle of nowhere. Whereabouts in the UK are you based?
We're in Worcestershire, as you say, in the UK, and actually I'm very lucky. I'm looking out the window now across a farm. We're very lucky we live on a farm, so we're in a lovely place for work.
Excellent. So I don't know, people may know you, they may not, I'm not sure, but give us a little quick flavour. Tell us about George.
Gosh. I suppose an eclectic background, really. I spent some time in the military as army officer. I spent some time in professional sport. I played a little bit of rugby, but most of my background's been in the corporate world, in the commercial world, in the oil industry and Coca-Cola. And then I guess about nearly 20 years ago, I transitioned out from corporate life into working in learning and development. And so for the last, I think it is nearly 20 years, I have been running a learning and development consultancy, focusing predominantly on leadership and team performance.
Right. Okay. And is that, I mean, was that an easy transition from corporate into entrepreneurial business or not?
I mean, anyone who's listening who's been through that process, and I'm sure there's lots of people, it's a strange step. And you just have to let go, don't you? And you feel yourself falling a little bit. Those first few months of very little income, yes. or in some cases zero, no sort of catchment opportunity. There's nothing to protect you. It's exciting, but it was a wonderful transition. It turned out to be successful, and I don't regret it at all. But for anyone who's done it, those first 6 months are a little bit scary. I
think that a lot of people they do make the leap as you did, and it is scary, and we've all done it in our own way, if you like, and they sort of get through it. But also a lot of people they don't make the leap, and they end up with regret or whatever it is, or if only I wish I had done. And that's even more more stressful, I would have thought, to a certain extent. But good job, you made the leap and successful. So and you work. I'm excited to talk about your sporting exploits really as well. But you're involved in DISC. I can see the poster behind you, everything DISC and personalities and profiling. Is that the sort of the core of the business you jumped into?
Yeah, we've got a couple of businesses. The main one that I look after is the consultancy. So that's the working with clients, looking particularly at organizational performance through leadership and team dynamics.
Yeah.
But we have another business called the Fruitful Toolbox that provides learning tools like DISC, like the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team, for learning and development professionals, so that they can deploy them in their own organizations, or if they're independents or run their own businesses, they can go out and use them as well. So that was a more recent addition, about it's nearly 6-7 years ago now. But that's proved to be a wonderful addition to the business. And obviously we use the tools ourselves in the consultancy, but we're able to deploy them through other people as well.
No, I love we work with DISC, have worked with DISC, the profile for a long time. It's very well known. It's I find it very elegant, simple, elegant way of explaining things as well. So I think it's a fabulous toolkit. So I'm aware of. I know a little bit about. I'm not an expert like you guys, but I do know a little bit about it. I know when we were sort of corresponding around, you coming on as my guest, and most people talk about their business and entrepreneurial journey. And I think you mentioned you've done some. I'm going to say done some yachting, which undersells it completely. But you were involved, I think, in the round the world yacht race. I mean, is that right? Yeah. So please explain that. That's perhaps a little bit more exciting even than DISC profiling.
Yeah, and funny enough, we did manage to use the disc profile with the team, so I
Right,
can
okay.
kind of connect the dots here a little bit. But yes, I was very fortunate in actually it's still running because it's had to go on pause because of obviously COVID.
Sure.
But yeah, I took part in the 1920, i.e. 2019, 2020 round the world yacht race, the Clipper Yacht Race, which is, to give you a kind of very brief overview of it, it's 11 boats. They're identical. They're 70-foot long, 98-foot tall mast. So these are big ocean-going racing boats, but they are built for speed, not comfort.
Right.
So the experience of sailing them is, it isn't for those that think that yachting is sort of gin and tonics and retired to the bar and the Admiralty at the end of the afternoon. This was somewhat different. It wasn't professional, so I have to take my hands off to the Vendée and to the big ocean races that do this professionally. So but this is about as close as you can get while still being an amateur yachtsman.
Right. And so, and where do you sail from and to? I mean, that might be a strange question, but what how does this thing work? How do the dynamics work?
Well, because it's a circumnavigation, it starts in London.
Yes.
And guess what? It finishes in London.
I know. As soon as I said, "Where'd you go from?" and to, I knew, I knew that this is going to not end well for me. So, okay, thank you for that.
No, it's quite funny when people say, so where did it start? Yeah, London. Oh, and is it around the world? Yeah, yeah. So where does it finish? Well, funny enough, it's like but no, what they do is they've broken the race up into 8 legs, and some of the crew sail the whole way around. And then there's other people like myself that would find it very difficult to take what is a whole year off to do that, because I've got kids, I've got a business. It's a little bit harder. Sure. I did a leg, so I did the London to Uruguay leg.
Wow.
It's about 7,500 miles as the crow flies. Obviously, boats can't go in a straight line because we're subject to the wind.
Sure.
And that was a total number of days of 39 days at sea for that first leg.
Wow.
We've completed 5 legs. There are still 3 legs to go. In fact, sorry, there's still 4 legs to go.
Right.
But the boats at the moment are in the Philippines because last March, guess what? The race was put on hold, and it's due to restart again in August. So we'll race from the Philippines up through China, across to west coast of the USA, down the west coast through the Panama Canal, up the east coast, back across the Atlantic, back and actually back across to Ireland, where they have an almighty party, which is I think tradition. And then they're going to race around the north of Scotland and back to London, where I will be there at the docks at the very same point where I sailed out, and waving the team back in.
Fantastic. I am going to edit out the question I asked you about where'd you start and end, because that was anyway. No, well, I'll leave it in. It's absolutely fine. So to get, I mean, again, I'm not a sailor. Luxembourg, we don't have any beaches or anything like that. We're landlocked, so boats are little pedalos and that sort of thing. How do you get involved in that? I mean, how did you get selected, or how did you get your place on the yacht?
Well, I'll tell a very brief story about how I got there, because I'm very lucky. I work with some wonderful teams. And one of the teams I was working with about 3 years ago was the McLaren Formula One team, and we were running their pre-season camp. And I was facilitating, or more likely pontificating about leadership and team performance. And we'd not long before worked with one of the Olympic boat race crews for the 2012 Olympics.
Okay.
And in the break, this tall guy walks over to me, who's the chief engineer for one of the cars, and started chatting to me about rowing. And I've been, obviously talking about this with very little experience about rowing. And I should have sort of gathered, because he was a tall gentleman, the penny should have dropped. But I rapidly realised that he knew a bit more about this than I did. And I said, Tom, you seem to know a lot. He said, yeah. I got a medal in the I think it was the 2008 Olympics.
As you do. Right. It's the sort of conversations I have with people.
And of course, I was like, oh my God. And it did tell me an important lesson. one, there's always someone in the audience or someone in the room, whether you're a leader, a manager, or a facilitator, or a keynote speaker, or whatever it is,
Yes.
that knows more than you do about
Absolutely.
whatever subject you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the secret is finding them as a leader, sometimes
Yes.
in their input. But it also reminded me that it had been some years since I'd really put myself in a tough situation under real pressure. And I know leading a business, we put ourselves under pressure. We
Sure.
do. It can be a tough environment, but I did feel I was missing challenging myself, challenging the theory and the data and the research I've been doing around particularly team performance.
Yes.
And having a story to tell.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
And all people with my, oh, did I tell you the time when I was, and so this kind of got a conversation going. Thanks to Tom. I thought, come on, I've got to go and refresh what I'm talking about. And we'd also be building a team performance model, which we've actually now managed to finish. And we've built an application called Team Performance Scan that measures team performance, but we haven't really sort of tested it again at the front coalface with me actually in the team rather than just watching the team.
Okay.
So I spoke to my wife Heidi and said, look, I feel I need to get out there and have a story to tell and test this and challenge myself. And we went through the, should we go and climb a mountain? And she said, well, realistically, you're not relying, whilst you're relying on other people, you're not going to be an integral person in the team. You're more likely to be sort of dragged up the mountain.
Yes.
And then we stumbled across, well, what about sailing? Because you would like sailing. And I haven't done a lot, but I've done enough to kind of know I like it. And she said, what about sailing? What about doing some sort of, race, big sailing race? And I thought, great, okay, I'll look at that. Well, within a week, I had an interview at Southampton. And I didn't tell my wife this because I thought, let me get the intel first. And then had the interview at Southampton, managed to sort of bluff my way through the interview and get selected to attend the sort of next stage. Yeah. And suddenly had the contract come through, just sort of say, sign here, which is at the point I said to Heidi, okay, by the way, I've got this contract. It's what for? I said, well, round the world yacht race.
As you do. That
was quick. But David, what happened really was it just took its own momentum. The more I researched it, the more I looked at the contract, the more I looked at the situation, it was perfect for what I was looking for.
Right, okay.
And I thought, great, I can challenge myself personally, I can test the theory. And you know what? I'm quite competitive. So here's a chance to have a bit of fun as well with racing and the camaraderie that goes with racing a yacht.
Yeah, of course. I mean, how many people or what's the crew on a yacht? Are they all amateurs? Is there a pro on there leading it, or how does that work?
Good question. There's on each yacht, there's two professionals, a skipper and what they call an AQP.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the crew are amateur. So and there's about 20 on each boat, something like that.
Right. Okay.
And they try and spread the experience across each boat. So there's a certain amount of medical staff, engineers, sailing experience on each boat, so that there's a balance and an element of the boat's pretty identical. In fact, they are identical, and the crews broadly have the same experience and capability.
Right. Okay.
So then the race comes down to strategy, teamwork, leadership, and making the boat go as fast as you can.
Yes.
Rather than an inherent advantage that one crew might have over another, or one boat might have over another.
So it's almost the perfect test, because the differential is the team spirit, performance, efficiency, all that sort of thing that goes with it. The mechanics are the same. It's the spirit and the team leadership. Okay. So to this, you can apply. I wouldn't know this. You can apply to be on this round the world yacht race, can you? Wow, I didn't realize that. So okay, amazing.
Yeah, and if anyone's out there kind of thinking, this sounds interesting, go and visit the Clipper website. One thing, I went and spoke to my children's school after I did it, and I wore my big yellow fowlies and stood in the sort of the school gym and spoke to them all. And my message was, go and live your story. Go and go and have a story. Don't just listen to other people's. And that's I'd go and visit it. It may not be for you, but it's amazing how many people who have never sailed before
mm-hmm.
actually do the race.
Really? So It was zero sailing experience. The first thing they do is jump on a massive racing yacht and head across the Atlantic.
Well, there's 18 months of training
Ah, right,
that
okay.
builds you up to that level, because
Yes,
inevitably there is a risk, like everything in life.
of
There's a
course,
risk,
yeah.
very managed risk,
Yeah.
but there's a high degree of safety. There's a high degree of training. There's a high degree of making sure that you have to pass each stage before they
Yeah,
let you progress. So
sure.
they won't let you out into the big wide ocean until you've passed all those
Right,
levels.
there is a good preparation there. Okay, but there are some, I guess, sort of similarities here in terms of the entrepreneurial journey and doing this. You have to have the leap of faith to actually go and do this and put your name down and get out there and get on. But there's a risk factor involved with that as well, isn't there?
There is. I think you can prepare for that.
Yeah,
Whatever role you're in, you can prepare for that, and that's almost your training and thinking about how am I going to cope. How am I? But there is nothing different. There's nothing better
mm,
than just doing it,
yeah,
and learning as you go. And there's so much you just can't prepare for. So all the training we did was to try and cope with different weather conditions and different.
yeah.
But halfway across the Atlantic, Storm Dennis paid a visit.
Of course,
And,
okay.
and whilst, yeah, it can be pretty rough in the Solent,
Yeah,
it doesn't prepare you to be 2,000 miles from the nearest coastline, in fact,
yeah.
from the nearest land, facing a big storm. So you just can't practice that. You can't prepare for it. You just have to experience it. And I guess that's where the excitement is. Yeah.
And so you leave the safety of London, and you're across, so 2,000 miles across the middle of nowhere on the Atlantic. Storm Dennis turns up. How do you deal with that? Because there's you've got training and experience and background. You have a military background as well. It all fits well, but at some point you're sort of way out of comfort zone, I would think, and it gets very real. I would have thought. What sort of emotions and how do you deal with that when you're going across?
Um, it One of the things about that situation was
Mm,
that we could see the storm coming because you get weather updates every 6 hours. So just to give
right.
you a little flavour of what it's like on the boat, and then I'll come
Mm,
back to that question, David, if that's all right. You've got a 20 crew,
mhm.
and you are racing the boat 24 hours a day. There's no sort of stopping and anchoring up, which clearly is impossible in the middle of the ocean anyway.
Sure.
So you're racing 24 hours a day, and that 20-man crew or 20 people crew, because there's a mix of nationalities,
Mhm.
sex, culture, everything was a real melting pot of people, which was
Right.
fantastic. Um, Typically, you've got 10 racing the boat at any one time, and 10 people trying their very best to get some sleep on this sort of little hammock thing. That's, bearing in mind, if you're sailing into the wind, you're
Yeah.
tacking. The boat's at a real 45-degree angle, so
Absolutely. Yeah.
everything is tipped up. So you're desperately trying to sort of sleep, and then of course they go and tack on a different angle, and then you go the other way, and you nearly fall out of your bunk. But
Wow.
you're trying desperately to sleep, either in horrendously hot conditions across the doldrums and across the sort of very hot parts of off West Africa, or it starts to get very cold in the southern Atlantic and pretty miserable.
Yeah.
Um, and it's this kind of factor of endurance that you're
Mm,
trying to cope with, and you're doing 4 hours on, typically 4 hours off
okay.
is the pattern. So you'll be racing the boat for 4 hours, and then you get your 4 hours off, depending on watch system that the boat's using.
Yeah.
And in that off watch, you are trying to get something to eat, trying to rehydrate as much as you can,
Mhm.
trying to sort out a few bits and pieces, just normal life,
Yeah.
trying to get out of all your wet kit, and then trying to roll into your bunk and get what's left of your 4 hour off shift to
Wow.
close your eyes. And then before you know it, your bunk buddy's giving you a bit of a shake to say, George, you're back on deck, mate.
Off you go. Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard. So it's a real endurance test.
Yeah.
Rather than this sort of exciting sailing that you could imagine that you see on the America's Cup, where everyone, you can see the other boat.
Yeah.
After the first, 6-7 hours of a race start,
Hmm.
the boats pick their own strategy,
Yeah.
and then you don't see them. You
Well,
don't see
they
the
sort
other
of
boat.
separate and they're doing their own thing, and you don't see them again almost.
In fact, we saw very few vessels apart from off West Africa, a few fishing vessels.
Wow.
And then the closer we got to Brazil, you'd see some oil tanker traffic.
Yeah.
But apart from that, we wouldn't see the boats. It's a very different type of racing to those that are
Yes.
used to dinghy racing.
Sure.
Um, So you've got this experience that you're getting a weather update every 6 hours, and as a team, you're getting together to decide your strategy. But you could see Storm Dennis coming. You could literally every 6 hours, oh, here it comes, here it goes, and they're trying to map the route it's taking, and it's pretty obvious that it's heading towards us, whatever strategy we take.
Sure.
So as it starts to build, you're preparing, and that's. I know we try and prepare for what we know is coming, but you also can't always prepare for everything, because
Sure.
you don't know what speed the wind's going to hit you out. You don't know what angle it's going to hit you out. You don't know what's. But basically, we just went into, okay, everything that isn't locked down, tidied up, put away, strapped down, make sure that's all done, tidy everything up, make sure everything's checked. If we have to double up on certain attachments, if we're attaching a spinnaker, let's have 2 attachments. If one goes, we've still got a safety on it. So you just prepare everything you can. And when the storm hit, there was an Aussie guy called Haz, an ex-rugby league player on the boat with me, and we were up on the foredeck trying to get a Yankee in a big sail that had fallen into the sea, as the lightning was crashing around us, and the waves were coming over. And I know I'm just making this sound like, it is one of his stories, but it was genuinely. And I looked across at him, and he looks at me, and we caught each other's eyes. We're trying to pull this Yankee in. We're drenched, and we just looked at each other, caught each other's eye, and we both burst into this massive grin, because it was why we did the race. It was for these moments of exhilaration, of excitement, of not real danger, because you're tethered on in any at night, and in any particularly once the wind gets over 15 knots, you're tethered on. So if you go overboard, you're still attached to the boat,
right?
So you're not going to be sort of left behind.
Yes.
But there's still an element of clear of risk, and the grin. I could see his teeth. He got these sort of Aussie perfect teeth. He was got glinting off the lightning, and we both just went. I won't use the language we shouted at each other, but it was like, this is why we're here.
This is it. This is the moment. Okay.
So sometimes in the middle of what feels like a crisis, I know it can feel really uncomfortable and really unpleasant, and there's significant consequences. And I'm not going to draw parallels to COVID, because that's a bit different. But But there is an exhilaration in teams when they face crisis, when they face their toughest situation, that actually makes them respond sometimes. That goes, you know what? And I suspect, whilst I said I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to now.
No, that's right.
Let's take the NHS or those bodies. It might be easier actually to take the fire service in the middle of a fire.
Yeah.
And they train for this moment. They wouldn't wish a fire on any building.
No, of course.
But when they're in it, my gosh, does the energy and the adrenaline and everything that they've trained for kick in? And it must be, to a certain extent, a little bit like some surgical teams or the NHS when they're responding to such a huge crisis, and they're needed. There must be a sense of adrenaline. The problem is maintaining that level of
it's the duration of it. I think in peaks and short bursts, then you're sort of okay. I guess it's the duration of it. But so out of interest, we're talking of sort of, I know, leadership and teams and business and everything. But the 20 people on the on the boat, the yacht, could you predict how they would respond under this sort of pressure? Do some people like you and the Aussie guy sort of step up and it became an adrenaline, let's make it happen? Did other people not deal with it that way, or was it predictable or not so much?
Another great question. I'm gonna say that, you know what, on that boat, by that point, I think any of us could have been on the foredeck doing it.
Right. Okay.
There is an element that it's a very heavy sail, so there's an element of physicality that is required.
Sure.
But I don't think Haz and I were up there because we'll have you two. I think there's elements of, we were on shift. That was our watch.
Right. Okay.
Up you go. Yeah. And I honestly had faith in all 20. And we were a real eclectic mix. We were from all around the world. Right. Male and female, everywhere from Saudi Arabia, America, Australia, all across Europe.
Wow.
And the dynamics, I think, were part of our success. This diversity, but undoubtedly you kind of lean towards certain skills more than others, because we have medically trained people on the boat. We have people who are with a Swiss guy who was very strong engineering wise.
Yeah.
But there is this dynamic that this mix that I think just comes together, which was one of the reasons I was on the boat.
Yeah, of course. So this team, eclectic, variety team, left. You did this amazing sailing across the Atlantic. Lessons. What did you observe? I mean, you were there, obviously participating, but also, I guess, observing in terms of leadership and dynamics and team. Any particular sort of lessons came out of that for you, or observations?
Yeah, I think many things were confirmed.
Yeah.
But being in it, and it had been, say, a while since I'd really felt that, was really powerful. It reinforced it for me. So there was a moment when we were sailing out of London. We were in St Catherine's Dock, and we sailed up the Thames, and we came, and they opened Tower Bridge for us. So we had these 11 big yachts sailing through Tower Bridge, which was hugely exciting. The crowds all along the sides of the river cheering us on. And my little 10-year-old son, that I was just about to leave for 2 months doing something, relatively risky.
Yeah.
I could see him on the dockside as I was motoring down the Thames away, and I could hear him screaming, "Daddy!" And he had tears in his eyes, and I was on the foredeck, and it was really interesting. And I was overwhelmed with emotion, and I still, even now, I can feel the emotion kicking in because it's replaying for me.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I suddenly felt selfish. I felt that I was causing, some stress for him, for my other son, and for Heidi, my wife.
Yeah.
And I welled up, and I thought I'd hidden it because I had my sunnies on, and it was a nice day, and I thought, and then I felt this arm around my shoulder. And again, I'm only picking on Haz because he happened to be there, but anyone would have done it. I had this guy put his arm around my shoulder and gave me a hug and said, "You'll be all right, mate." And it was that moment that I just thought, again, this is why I'm doing it, because he picked up on this, and he's seen me struggling. Yeah. And he's this what Aussies call mateship. Yeah. And you hear the the Aussie cricket team, mateship. We might call teamship or team dynamics or followership. But it taught me that there's a very fine line sometimes between leadership and being a great team member, because you know what? As a team member, you can constantly show leadership. You can constantly look around you and see people who are struggling in your team or people that you interact with, and spot that, and either just go and give a physical or metaphorical in today's world hug, or just ask a question, or just be aware of that, and that's great teamship. But I think it's all great leadership, and you don't have to be a leader to do that. So that's one big thing that was reminded of me, that leadership and followership, or leadership and teamship, are just two sides of the same coin, and you can be both, whatever your role is. You can.
I think there is this sort of this myth or sort of misunderstanding that leadership gives from the top down, and it's not, is it? It is, but it's across as well. It's dynamic, self leadership, and as you say, that little gesture, which was a sort of 5-second thing, meant the world to you, and that's leadership, isn't it? That's leadership and support.
Yeah, it wasn't a lingering hug, but it was enough just to sort of go, God, this is why I'm doing it. Yeah. And it made me feel almost instantly better that I could cope with this. So that was a big thing that came out of it. I think the other things that came out of it, that we had a professional skipper, and his style was very coaching style. I think you could describe, you talk about leadership styles, very coaching style. Very inquisitive about others, very willing to listen, even to the extent, before we even started the race, we got the team in a room. We did quite a lot of sort of, pre-race team building, as you can imagine. Sure. And we were in the room, and he said, "Right, I'm going to ask you all what your level of competitiveness is in regard to this race." And I'm going, "Well, daft question. Surely we're all here to win, aren't we?" Because I was being a bit narrow-minded, and then I thought, I see where he's going with this. And he did a simple exercise where he got us all to close our eyes, and he'd go 0 to 10, just saying the numbers 0, 1, 2, and he got us to put our hand up at the point where we get to in terms of how competitive you are. Right. And I kept my eyes closed, integrity being crucial. Yes. And I put mine up about 9 or something, and then he said, right, I've now taken this temperature check of how you will see it. And I'm going to tell you that there's a spread from 3 to 10 in the room.
3, my goodness, wow,
Yeah.
okay.
And I'm going, what? We can't win a race if you've got a competitive level of 3.
Sure.
And then we had a discussion around, what are our aims? And we started to develop this code for the boat that okay, what are we here to do? And we actually ended up agreeing that primary focus is getting all 20 of us into Uruguay safe.
Sure. Okay.
Because there had been, unfortunately, a couple of deaths in previous races and a number of serious injuries. But we made that our primary focus, safety. And then I said, fair enough. You know what? I can't argue against that.
Sure.
And if we're not safe, we're not going to win anyway. So they kind of go hand in hand. And then we started discussing what people wanted to get out of the race and their motivators for doing it. And we had elements of, well, I want to sail. I want a helm in the Southern Ocean.
Right.
Or I want to have fun. Or I want to do this. Or I want to win. And then suddenly we had this melting pot of what could be seen as competing priorities, i.e. having fun and helming in the Southern Ocean.
Yeah.
Winning the race may not be complementary because you may want to put your best helm, i.e. the helm is steering the boat, who's going to drive the boat the fastest on the helm and therefore win the race. But these competing priorities, we have to play through and come up with a crew charter that we all agreed to. And in fact, I've still got it somewhere.
Wow.
Here it is.
Okay, amazing.
Piped up and to right. And we said, right, this is what we're going to stick to. And this is what we're all going to commit to.
Yes.
And it was a wonderful way of having this clear code of conduct that we'd all adhere to.
Yeah.
But bearing in mind what our objectives were.
Yes.
And coming back to the leadership, so he managed to create this. And we used DISC, we used the 5 behaviors, we used the behavioral tools, we went orienteering, we did lots of activities to bring the team together and build trust and build relationship.
Yeah.
But Josh was at the heart of that, and Hugo, his AQP, was at the heart of all this, that he had a very coaching style, but every so often he would say, my voice. And that signal was, you've talked about this enough, it's my decision.
Right.
And I want you to listen.
Yeah.
And it taught me this thing that occasionally in times of crisis, you need my voice. Yeah. Times on the boat, you can't hear each other talk because it's so windy that your voice just goes. So you use my voice and you have to shout.
Yeah.
And there's times when, you know what, we have talked about this enough and I'm now going to make the decision. And he demonstrated this ability to have a hugely coaching, empowering style.
Yes.
When he said the words, my voice, it was, right, what do you want us to do, Josh? And it was sort of that moment of, I'm going to change my leadership style now.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. But this translates absolutely into business, maybe not to the same level as sailing across the Atlantic, but the rules of the game, the vision, the goals, the targets, objectives, participation. And as you say, when it's my voice, somebody's got to make a decision at some point that could be unpopular or maybe difficult, but it has to be done, and that's leadership. But this sort of translates across to business, entrepreneurship, and everything by the sound of it.
I completely agree, and with the work that I know you do, David, there's this thing about what are our objectives here? Absolutely. What are we trying to achieve? Yeah. And what was interesting is some of these competing objectives actually started to come together. So because we were safe, because we didn't break stuff, actually we went faster. We only split one sail, which on a 39-day race, that's pretty remarkable. For a storm as well, through a major storm. Yeah. We didn't injure each other, so we had a fit crew. Yeah. But also, we often would take it in turns to helm, and we built up the expertise that we could all steer the boat.
Yes. Okay.
Now, when the weather was so tough and punchy, or when we had someone at the mast trying to fix something, you'd want your best helm.
Yes.
But by and large, we rotated the helm. And when you're steering a big boat like this, your shoulders after about 20 minutes start to ache, particularly when
it's hard work.
Yeah. When you're sort of surfing down big waves. And because we were able to rotate, we were refreshed every time we got to the helm. We were alert mentally.
Yeah.
Physically, we were able to cope.
Hmm.
And we just constantly built this experience
Hmm.
that what we found compared to some other boats that had been putting their best helm on is they didn't build this capability across the team.
Right.
And there's probably an analogy there in the organizations, is that it's tempting to constantly put the best person in the best, your best for this.
Yes.
And at
Yeah.
times of crisis, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
But when it isn't crisis level, I think there's a role for going, you know what, get out of your comfort zone, develop, do
Yes.
something that you're not necessarily the best at in the team,
Yes. Okay.
because you may well be called upon.
Sure.
And that's very powerful.
Yeah. And so, and where, Dan, of interest, where did you come? Were you first across, or?
Well, we weren't given a chance at the start because Josh wasn't terribly experienced as an ocean racer compared to some of the other skippers, and some of the other
Right.
skippers had actually done this race before. So we were kind of, there wasn't a lot of money on us. We were expecting, we came in third in the first leg.
Well, I mean, that's good.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, we got on the podium, and it was an amazing result. So
Yeah, absolutely.
something worked.
Yeah.
And I can't say that the other boats weren't equally talented at putting in strategies and developing culture. I'm sure they did, but
Sure.
something clicked on our boat. We were having so much fun, and even when you hadn't had any sleep, when you were cold, wet, miserable at 3 a.m, trying to make the most of, we were still laughing. And
So have you kept in touch with the remainder of the crew?
absolutely, yeah.
Really?
I mean,
Wow. That's the indication of spirit, isn't it, for a team?
yeah, and I can't wait for the boat to come back to Ireland for the party, and then London for the final prize giving, because we're in second place now, actually. So
Oh, really?
overall,
Oh, wow. So
we're now in second place. We won a few legs. We won the Cape Town to Australia leg,
Yeah.
and we're proving to be a tough nut to beat. And
Fantastic.
so we're in second place,
Yeah.
which is really exciting.
Absolutely.
You never know.
Well, so when I know with COVID, they're sort of parked up in the Philippines at the moment. When's it due to end? Is there a due date, or just waiting now for the lockdown to come to an end?
Currently, recently, I had an email today from
Yeah.
the race organisers. It's due to restart in August.
Okay.
And again, the analogy with business is no different here. They're trying to estimate. They're trying to go with the information they have. But I think August is a realistic start.
Yeah.
And therefore the race will finish in January.
Right. Okay. So
it'll take another sort of 5 months for them
Yeah.
to sail the remaining legs back into London.
Sure. Fantastic. So I'm going to ask you a very tricky question now. If you could boil down that amazing experience into 3 tips, lessons, or bits of guidance for people who are either in business under these COVID conditions. I mean, it's been very difficult and challenging for lots of people in lots of ways, this, or somebody wanting to start their own business. What could you give us 3 top tips, lessons learned, leadership from that experience?
Yeah, I think I'd go back to these things. It is invest time thinking about culture. And I know there's lots of culture eat strategy for breakfast and stuff, and it's a bit kind of feels a bit cheesy at times, but I genuinely believe that investing time in creating the right culture, in thinking about the team dynamics and thinking about building trust, developing positive conflict, getting people to challenge each other, but in such a way that they feel they're doing it as a support rather than as criticism. So,
Sure.
And I know it's not always easy to do that, particularly when times are tough. But as a leader, I'd almost encourage leaders to constantly think, what am I going to do today or this week, however large or small, that will have a positive impact on the individuals and the team that work in our organization.
Yes.
And it might be just picking up the phone,
Yes,
rather
exactly.
than relying on the weekly town hall meeting.
Yeah.
Or it might be just dropping them a handwritten note, or it might be all these things. Just what can I do to develop this culture of feeling that they're part of something? I think that's a big thing for me that was very powerful. Did a lot of that, as I say, before we even got on the boat in the race.
Sure.
I think the second one would be around the clarity of what you're trying to achieve. And again, I know, David, this will speak very close to your heart, but what's the overall aim? What's our mission? What are we trying to achieve? And we were very clear. We need to be safe. We need to make sure that people are getting what they want from this race.
Yeah.
And we're going to do our best to win. And those three things were what we were all about.
Mm-hmm.
And everything we did, we were checking people okay and getting what they needed from it.
Yep.
We were making sure everyone was safe. And are you tethered on? And is your life on correctly? The equipment.
Yeah.
And that constant, how can we make the boat go faster?
Mm-hmm.
How can we can trim this? We can change the sail. I know it's a lot of work to get the other, literally half a ton of sail out of the locker, but we could do this. We could make another half a knot speed, and half a knot speed over 7,000 miles.
Absolutely,
is you'll beat the other boat by 200 miles.
Yes,
that's the kind of difference.
Yeah.
So there's something about this. What are we trying to achieve?
Mm-hmm.
What's our strategy to achieve it?
Yeah.
And the other one I would say is regular communication. So on a boat, you have two watches. One,
Mm-hmm.
as I said, racing. One that's trying to sleep or eat or just live.
Yes.
And when they swap over, there's a half-hour window, effectively, which is called watch handover, where
Mm-hmm.
the off watch is now being briefed before they become the on watch. So they're being told what's gone on in the night, what's gone on in the where the other boats are, what the weather's coming, the tide, what we've broken, and this was a really important moment
Mm-hmm.
of communication that joined the whole boat together. We didn't stay in two watches because we effectively rotated people through the watches so that you change team every 24 hours.
Sure.
But this ability to communicate was massively important.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd think on a 70-foot boat with 20 of you, it's not difficult to communicate. But bearing in mind, at any one point, there is probably at least a third of the boat asleep.
Yeah.
Isn't as easy as you think.
Yeah.
So that's probably the other thing I'd say to leaders and teams is constantly think about communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And even through this crisis that we're having at the moment, even if there's nothing to add,
Mm-hmm.
still say, I'm really sorry, but there's nothing to add. As soon as you leave a gap in communication, people will fill it.
Yes.
And it may not be filled with the message or the accuracy or the dynamic that you want.
That's a great point. And I think, and for me, it was such a fabulous story, and thank you for sharing. The one of the points that will stick with me is the big Aussie guy who put his arm around you and said, you're going to be okay. That's the lesson. It's almost an obvious thing to a degree, but maybe people don't do that either literally or metaphorically. And under these lockdown, COVID conditions, working from home and that sort of thing, difficult to physically do that, but it could be just a call or a conversation, I guess.
I agree. And I think I'll just say something I did last week with a client, which was at the start of a meeting, small executive team, 6 people in the team. Mm-hmm. So you can do this quite easily with a small team, but you can still do it with a larger team. Yeah. And typically at the start of their exec meeting, there'd be a case of saying, how are you? And guess what you'd get is, yeah, great, thanks. Or you'd get, what do you do the weekend? Well, funny enough, not a lot. Mm-hmm. Took the dog for a walk, but that's pretty much all I was allowed to do. But you tend to get what I call sort of platitudes. Yeah. And what we did instead was we said, right, how are you? But don't answer. Spend 2 minutes writing down on a piece of paper or typing in an iPad or whatever you want to do, how you're really feeling.
Yes.
So what's motivating you at the moment? What are you fearful of? Mm-hmm. What's your, out of 10, and just just write down generally how you're feeling.
Yes.
And then we went after 2 minutes, right, now tell me how you're feeling.
Yes.
And the quality of what you got back was amazing. So you saw more vulnerability, which helps build trust. Yeah. You saw people saying, I need some help in these areas. Mm-hmm. And saw people saying, I can help with that.
Yeah.
You saw people sharing what they're motivated about, which inspired others. So you got this sort of quality of true answer to how are you. Absolutely. That wasn't grumbling and moaning, but was genuinely, let's have a proper conversation. And it took 20 minutes.
Yeah, sure. But it's a valuable 20 minutes, isn't it?
It was illuminating and powerful then for the rest of the meeting because it just had a different atmosphere.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I think that the two of the most dangerous words in conversation are the words "I'm fine," because when you say to somebody, "How are you?" go, "I'm good, I'm fine, I'm okay," and you sort of know it's not true, or not necessarily true. But as you say, if you can peel away that, especially in these times of uncertainty and pressure, and I'm sure you do this as well. I speak to people over Zoom, and they're in their back bedroom on the dining room table with the laptop, and the dog's here, the kids are over there, and it's pretty high pressure stuff. And a lot of people aren't okay. They need to be able to express and have some of the support. So I think that's a great idea to dig a bit deeper. You peel away the layers a little bit.
And you know that fine, it's when your wife says, "How do I look in this?" and you say, "Oh, fine." You know that's a
Dangerous,
disaster.
dangerous.
Yes, and it is the word. Yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. Isn't an answer.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So would you do this again? Would you, if you had the opportunity, would you go again on the yacht?
Just check that.
Yeah, where's Heidi? Is she around or?
She's listening. It was tough. I've got to be honest. It was tough. It was tougher than I thought it would be.
Okay.
Not because of the racing and the being on the deck. It was the endurance of the lack of sleep.
Right.
Because
Okay.
you can't sleep. There's too much noise on the boat. It's so noisy. It's so rough. You're being thrown around all the time. You're also struggling to take the calories on because there's a limit to what you can take on the boat because of the heavier the boat, the slower it will go, and you constantly speed, so you're limited. And after 3-4 days, you haven't got any fresh food. So for the other 35, you're on to dried food, and it's very hard to take on the calories that you need to. So we lost a lot of weight.
Sure.
I mean, I lost 1.5 stones.
Really? Wow.
7 days. Yeah. And I had to buy a belt when I got to Uruguay because the trousers were falling down when I put them back on. But there's something there for me around the endurance was enough of a test. Thanks. Yes. I would love to go racing with that crew again. I would love to do a shorter leg.
Yes.
I'd love to race maybe from New York to Bermuda.
Yes.
Surprise, surprise, or for Ireland around back to London. But to do that again, I kind of feel I've ticked it. But
yes, okay.
Interestingly, and I don't know whether other people or yourself have found this, David, but these last 9 months, I have started to feel trapped. And when I did that little exercise, I said to the team I was working with, you know what, just to share, vulnerability, I'm going to do the same exercise. Yeah. And I wrote down, I'm feeling trapped because I'm an adventurer. I'm naturally adventurous. I like to go places, and I normally travel internationally with my job. Yeah. And I haven't been. Yeah. So I'm now starting to get that. I need to have something to look forward to. I need to have something planned. Absolutely. That is another adventure, another story.
I think everybody needs. I think you're absolutely right. This lockdown, and it's a global thing. Obviously, we need to have this brightness of future now. We need to know some sort of clarity. When's it going to come to an end? When can we get back onto whatever normal looks like, and get traveling like they say. We'd travel a lot. We would do international, whatever it is. We haven't done it I haven't been on a plane for nearly 12 months now. And I didn't miss it for the first 6 months. It was quite nice not to have to wait at Schiphol for a transfer. But actually, it's part of, as you said, we'd want to get out there. We're social creatures. We need that as well. So these are special times that hopefully will be coming to a change or a close reasonably soon, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think there is that light. And I think for us as business leaders and running our own organization, we've got to be prepared to accelerate pretty quick, because I think it's honestly, gosh, let's hope it's coming, but we have to be prepared. Even if it's delayed, we have to prepare to go pretty quick, pretty soon.
I think so.
But we're also, in our business, we're going, what will we get to, let's say April, May, and it starts to get significantly better. What will we regret not having done?
Absolutely.
And we said this right at the start. What will we regret not having done in this period of time when we've got this opportunity? And there's still 1 or 2 things to finish. We finished building the app that measures team performance scans, and we've done that, but we haven't, done all the work in terms of rolling it out. Sure. So we've got to get all these work streams finished before the engine kicks in again. And we hope we're busy again.
A different sort of stress. I think it's interesting what have people done with the time, because when we look back on this, 12 months, 15 months, whatever, and hopefully it'll be a unique moment in history. We won't do it again, but it is, you know, we're living through history being made. And if you think of the things that have happened during this period with COVID, with the change of the US president, with Brexit, with all this sort of, it's pretty momentous times we're living through right now. And we should look back on it and have obviously learned from it, but actually thrived from it. I know it's tough for a lot of people out there, but what can we do? It's why we did this renovation cottage. We had the time we did it and nearly finished it. And there's things in the business. I agree with you. I think there's going to be a pent-up demand that will release, I'm going to say April, May time, something like that. We've got to get prepared for it. But we've got to, you know, as business owners and entrepreneurs, we've got to get ready for that as well. So I think it is interesting, quite scary, but, you know, also exciting times as well in lots of ways.
It is. And don't you think that sometimes a balance as a leader, that you have to play between confidence and vulnerability, or admitting that you don't know the answers? Because absolutely, I think from my experience, a lot of people like to see a leader who is prepared to be open, honest, and to a certain extent vulnerable, show their human side.
Sure.
But particularly through times of uncertainty and crisis, they don't want someone who keeps going, well, I don't know. No, exactly. I'm struggling. I haven't got a clue. How do you expect me to know? So they want this balance that there's a leader that's confident, and it's sort of, you know, this realistic optimism that we talk about sometimes, and this kind of, you know, look, I'm in control. I have faith. In the military, we used to have an expression: officers don't run because it scares the troops.
Right. Yes.
And there's a bit of truth about that. Don't panic. Don't be confident. Have some confidence with this, but don't be afraid at times to say, if I had all the answers, believe me, I'd share them with you. But we are dealing with some unknowns. The whole VUCA world, we have to be honest about that, and just try and communicate as much as we can. But don't feel that we have to fill in every box, because we don't know it.
We don't know. And I think the thing is key is make a decision. You know, even if it's not perfect, make a decision. And I had a colleague of mine was in the police, and he said that they were taught, similar to you were saying about this, you know, that officers don't run. He said, you run to a fire, but you walk to a fight. Because if you run to a fight, it's going to amplify, it's going to get out of control. And as leaders, you have to know when to run, you know, when to walk, and when to keep it calm, and when to do things. And it does feel unusual and scary, but these are unusual and scary times as well, to a degree. So I think it's a fabulous experience you've had, with the analogies that link over to, you know, obviously clearly back to business. Is there a book? Is there a book coming out of this? The make the yacht go faster, or anything like that for you?
No, I don't think so, because let's be honest, first of all, I needed a leg, and
sure.
some of these times, going around the whole world, and therefore there's a little bit of me that I don't want to devalue the experience, because it was very intense.
Sure.
But there's a little bit of me thinks, you know what, there's another adventure that I want to have, and so maybe there's a story or a book further down the line.
Yeah.
And I also, you know, we've got to be careful here, because when we have these experiences, it's very easy for me, as you've thankfully listened, to get excited about it and replay it. But for those that are listening, it's really important that they connect what they want to, rather than feel, well, that's the story and therefore, because the danger is that this world is so complex and we're all so different. That's why you and I are, you know, in employment, because often people need some support.
Absolutely.
That they have to pick the messages that's appropriate for them. And so the sort of story, and here's the leadership lessons, for me, is on dangerous ground. I'd rather almost tell the story and what I learned, and let people pick what resonates for them.
Take from it. Yeah, good point. That's a great point.
And also, I think, sorry to continue with this, but I also am respectful enough to realize that what I did was very special. But I know people who are caring for someone. I'm trying to hold down a job. I'm trying to, you know, manage a business. I'm trying to volunteer at the local, you know, and their story is actually probably as challenging, if not doubly challenging, as my experience. So again, it's about finding what you've learned from all of your stories and all your experiences. And I feel like just a bit of a fraud sometimes if I started writing a book, because I'd be thinking that guy who walked up to me who had the bronze medal in the Olympics, I'm thinking, you know what, Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
Well,
share stories. Let's
there's-
not pretend that I'm the only one who's done.
I think it's a good point you make about this sort of. There's always somebody with a bigger, better, whatever it is, story. But equally, I think it's important that everybody, to a degree, tells their story, because everybody's got a story. And as you say, maybe that somebody's going through a different situation, different life path, whatever it is. But everybody's story can inspire or help or guide or somebody else. And I think and I include that everybody, we have as an obligation to share our stories, because if one thing that you've said this afternoon has inspired one person, job done. That's it. It doesn't have to inspire millions. I'm not sure. Hopefully, it will. But everybody's got the ability to do that, and that's sort of leadership as well. I think we are storytellers, and but I think we've maybe lost that a little bit as well. But maybe write a book at some point anyway.
No, you've positioned that perfectly. I completely agree. Share your stories, whatever they might be, and that's what connects us as human beings.
Exactly right. I think something that we've probably lost during this lockdown is this sort of sociability, the telling, the campfire stories, those things we've missed out to a certain extent. And genuinely, I do these conversations, these podcasts, as much for me as anybody else, but it's good to connect and have a conversation and share ideas and that type of thing as well. But
and I think what we have to be careful of as leaders is that we don't spend our time telling the story. We have to also spend a lot of our time listening to other people's. Absolutely. And that's time consuming for people who are in very busy roles. Yes. But it pays itself back over and over when you can find the time.
Absolutely. Well, you and I, when before we pressed the record button, I know we were talking about how long should we be on this, and it's sort of about half an hour. We've done much better than that. We could go on for another 2 or 3 hours, perhaps do a second installation or something like that. But I've thoroughly enjoyed your conversation and your story, so thank you for sharing. People listening to this will be inspired by what you said. How can they contact you? What's the best way of getting in touch to have a conversation about what you do professionally, or to find out more about you as an individual?
Very happy for people to drop me an email, and I will get back to everyone. George@thefruitfulgroup.com. Okay. The website is thefruitfulgroup.com, and you'll see the range of businesses we have there. Yeah. And on LinkedIn, George Blakeway. There may well be another one, but if you try and spot the guy with the big nose and no hair, then very happy to be connected with. And it is all about sharing, and I'd love to hear other people's stories and get to know other people as well.
Absolutely. And please, I'm going to be tracking you now to see how this does when your boat comes in first. And please keep us updated. I mean, we're connected, and that sort of thing we're talking about.
Well, what's wonderful is actually there's some software once they restart the race that you can follow all 11 boats. And
oh, really? Okay.
It's updated every 6 hours, so you become an armchair sailor by watching the team compete. And why are they heading west now? But you never know what's going on the boat. There's no way of communicating with the boat, because otherwise there'd be unfair advantage. So you just have to sit there and watch it in the armchair.
So you can see it being plotted across the sea. Fantastic. Yeah. George, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Fabulous story. We have not run over time, no such thing as that, but I think people have got a flavour for what you're doing. So for me, thank you. Really appreciate it. I'm sure anybody listening or watching, please contact George, say thank you, say hi, say hello, and have a look at what he gets up to. So to close it, again, thanks so much. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time. They've got other people booked in, and equally as interesting, I hope. That's always my objective, to get interesting people on here. Thank you, George, again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And bye from me, and I'll see you next time round in a couple of weeks' time. Bye for now.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you for listening to my story.
It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.